Hello, if you've been before, welcome back. If not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is inspired by the Dead Meat channel and their Kill Count series. I'm doing a kill count for the horror podcast, Hi Nai. For this video, I'll be covering episodes 1 through 23, that is 30 total episodes. Hi Nai is a horror podcast created, directed, and written by Matsi Dapul. Direct from the Hi Nai podcast website, which I will link in the description, this is what the show is about. Hi Nai is a Filipino-led analog-style supernatural folklore horror podcast with an overarching plot where the protagonist treats the horrors with the casual lived experience of someone who was raised around them. Filipina immigrant Mari Datuin, raised by a Babilan mother, accidentally saves her neighbor from a rotting monster and is now on a mission to stop the dangerous supernatural events in Toronto. Alongside two supernatural detectives, Donner and Murphy, her 6'2", strong-armed lesbian neighbor Laura, and Ashvin, a celebrity conman guru with real magic powers. Not listed here is also Evelyn. I love Evelyn. This series is framed through Mari's phone calls to her nanay, mother, in the Philippines, as well as the detective's tape recordings. Most of the episodes start with her calling her mother and saying, "Hi, Nai." At the time of recording this video, I've not finished the show. I usually want to have a show finished before I do a kill count, but they are still releasing new episodes. It's going to take me some time to finish it, but I feel like enough time has passed for me to at least do a bit of kill counting for the earlier episodes. I've already done kill counts for Magnus Archives, Malevolent, and several books, and I would be very grateful if you would watch them. The playlist is going to be somewhere up above. I will be going episode by episode, listing the people killed and giving context and explanations about them using this framing to talk about this really amazing show. Some kills are very explicit, while some are implied or referenced. And I generally use one special rule. If the kill is used for storytelling, as in included as part of the horror genre, I will count it. Monsters, bones, and vague mass casualty events will also be counted depending on what is being described, especially the mass casualty events. We'll get to that. I'll explain more about this when I come to them. More housekeeping. I've managed to count out 30 exact episodes, but that does not align with the number system that they have for the episodes themselves. There are some episodes that are addendums to main episodes or side stories or something like that, demarcated as either a 0.1 or a 0.5, 0.2, whatever, after the main number. And that means between episodes 1 and 23, there are 30 episodes that I'll be covering for the first part. And then between episodes 24 and 46, that's exactly 30 episodes as well. And 47 to 69 is 30 episodes as well. So those are the 3 videos of the kill counts that I'm going to be doing that I have planned for. At the point of recording, they have not reached enough episodes to make a 4th video with 30 episodes. So when that happens, I'll be making a 4th video. So keep an eye out for that. So without further ado, please join me as I count all the kills in Hi Nai. All right, here we go. Hi Nai, episodes 1 through 23. I forgot to mention in my intro, there are acts within Hi Nai. There is at least 3 acts so far, but Act 3 has been going on for a long time, and I don't know how the acts are going to end up to be, so I didn't want to do a structured act by act kill count, so I just did episodes themselves. And within each act, there are arcs that help move the story along anyways. So like, even if there wasn't an act, there's good moments here and there where I can be like, this is a good section and this is another section, etc., etc. But anyways, episode 1, Bulak, or Rot. We have this episode is the introduction of Hai Nai. She's calling her mother Hai Nai, and she tells her about saving her neighbor Laura from being attacked by the rotting thing. And we can count the rotting thing, killed by Mari herself. She was the person who finally destroyed the button foci that was animating the rotting thing. Then we can also count to the unidentified male corpse that was found in an alleyway. That ghost of that person had become the rotting thing through the foci. They got permits to dig, and they found a bit of a horror show with a bunch of Torontonian wildlife piled on top of what they eventually discovered was an unidentified human corpse, half-baked into the cement of the old building ours had been built over. A suggestion that this is a homeless person who was killed by the construction accidentally, or at least died in the middle of the construction and no one noticed. And all the bodies on top of it also caused a lot of fear death, and the foci latched onto that and created the rotting thing. In episode 2, Gina, or Cold, we have Mari and Donner at the Creek House where an antique baby bottle tries to kill a woman. And we encounter the Cold Ghost, or we will later find out is called Clarence Thompson, who was killed by Mary and Donner as they were trying to save this woman. The name of the ghost, throughout the entire story, it's just calling him the Cold Ghost. But in episode 40, Pulong, Mari says that she recognized this man, Clarence Thompson, as the Cold Ghost. And then we will get a lot more about Clarence Thompson farther in the story. Here we get to one of these addendums that I mentioned in episode 2.5, Remind Me to Tell You Later, Dianique, where Mari had told before Donner, I believe in Gana, to remind her to tell him the story of when an evil baby tried to kill her. This is that story. That evil baby is a Tianak, which is a monster in Philippines that pretends to be a baby and lures people into the forest to kill it. And it tried to kill her, but it failed. And we can add the Tianique, which is killed by Mari's Lola, her grandmother, off screen. She says Lola had gone to fetch the bolo, which is a type of weapon, I believe. I had dropped sometime when I was running away, and when I came downstairs, she was cleaning it at the tap right outside the door to the backyard. It was clear she'd made good use out of it, implying she killed the Tianique. In episode 3, Oras, or Time, this is the episode where Mari and Laura have a little argument about Laura keeps relying on Mari to try to find these bad trinkets, these foci, which we will eventually learn they're called. And in Laura's search for cursed trinkets and good trinkets, this leads her to Guru Madev's store, and then gets trapped in George Langford's clock miasma, witnessing her worst nightmares, and then everyone else is also witnessing their worst nightmares. And this is also when we introduce Ashvin, who is Guru Mahadev, but that's his persona. He is actually just called Ashvin, and he's like a con man in a way. He is just taking money from rich people who are exploiting exotic treatments, quote unquote. We can count to the unidentified body created by the foci that was killed by Murphy. There's an implication that this was a form of Murphy when harmless, because it's mentioned in episode 37, Ibig, that, like we saw with Mari and Laura, the miasma is showing them their worst moments of their life, and he was homeless at some time, and so he saw himself as a homeless person. But then later in that episode, he is almost attacked and dragged away by this person, but it's not enough for me to say that he killed himself there. That's also not a real human. It is part of the miasma, but still, that's a body I can count. This miasma is here because of the soul-bound foci of George Langford, and it is nullified by the soul-bound foci of Marianne Weeks. I cannot count these two soul-bound foci once they're both destroyed and used up, because Marianne will be confirmed fully dead later, and her foci aren't lingering like the other elders, and George Langford will not die until all of the fragments of his soul will be killed also later in the season. So, unless there's further confirmation that there's more soul fragments of an elder, if they have encountered a soul-bound foci of that elder, destroying that foci will be counted as that elder's second death. So here, I cannot count George Langford's death here yet, and I cannot count Marianne's either. This is also when we have the introduction of George Langford as like this specter, and I really like the voice because it is just Motsi Dapul doing a voice. I forgot how she described it, but it sounded a lot to me similar to Nikola Orsnov, and this show is very heavily inspired by the Magnus Archives. So, I mean, yeah, I feel like that's an inspiration there. In episode 4, Multo, or Apparition, we have Ellen and Y investigating two ghost sightings in the University of Toronto that Mary, Donner, and Murphy eventually encounter as well. We can count Reznikov, or Grigori, killed by Donner. It is confirmed later in episode 38, Sinungaling, that this was a soul-bound focus of Grigori that had latched onto the folklore ghost tale of Reznikov. Donner had eventually shot the foci that was animating these ghosts, so we can also count to the Soldier's Tower ghost that was killed alongside Reznikov / Grigori. In episode 5, Kanta, or Song, we have Mari and Donner encountering a singing ghost in an abandoned warehouse. We can count Alice James, who was killed by a foci. This death by foci was confirmed in episode 16, Pasukan, and episode 17, Kasunduan. There was a little bit of confusion on my part of how she died. I had first thought it was suggested, implied that the benefactor had a hand in this because we heard the Billy Boy sound, but it is just he is sort of just watching over things happening, so it wasn't his fault that she died. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. So, and then we can also count again Alice James's ghost, who was banished peacefully by Mari. After Alice James was killed by foci, her ghost lingered because of that foci. I think her foci was gone by that point, but her ghost lingered there in that building, and Mari was able to help her pass on peacefully. And so in this in this world, there are ghosts at times, and maybe there's a difference between banishing a ghost and destroying a ghost. We encounter this dilemma a little later in the season, but for me, for the purpose of the kill count, this is just another death for the ghost, whether it be destroying the ghost or banishing it. It's still a death. So here, Mari killed this ghost, but she just banished it peacefully. Episode 6, Lara 1, or Portrait, we have Mari and Laura searching for trinkets, and they find a miasma in a painting store. They had found George Langford's other foci, and they speak to him more about the foci and stuff like that in the miasma. And we can count Jean-Paul Renard, because Jean-Paul Renard was like split in parts so many times, he just became monstrous, which happens with soulbound foci. We can count him as being killed by Laura. She axed the soulbound foci with her axe. No other foci of Renard has been found so far, so I can count him here. I do need Laura to have more people killed with axes. I need her to kill more monsters with axes. I need her more. Period. I feel like she should be here more in this show, but she's not that much towards the latter half to where I am right now. So give her an axe and bring her back. Episode 7, Panawagan, or Summoning. There are no kills here. In this episode, everyone minus Evelyn gathers for a ritual to summon George Langford from that trinket that Mari and Laura had found, and they talk to him. And here he tells them of the foci and the benefactor and what the foci are supposed to be doing.
Hundreds upon hundreds of worthless little baubles, sent out into the city, activating wherever they ended up, feeding on misfortune, terror, life, splitting an equal amount of life force between us, sustaining us for years longer than any human being. Any other way would have been monstrous. You see, that way, it was random, no matter your station or who you were. True fairness.
We see that eventually some of these foci are not actually soul-bound. They're just activating some sort of miasma or latching onto a ghost or something along those lines. At the end of this episode, Langford is able to escape and secretly possesses Ashvin, and he sort of ghosts Murphy, and that leads to some drama a little later. In episode 8, Panaginip, or Dream, Mari has a dream about the foci and the things that she's encountered so far. We can also count the old man's husband's spirit. She is talking to this old man in her dreams, and she helps his spirit pass on and rest in her sleep. And so that's at least like similar to what happened with Alice James's ghost. She was able to help her pass on. In episode 9, Cuento, or Story, we have a DJ in the Dark episode. Throughout the season, we'll have these interludes of DJ in the Dark, who is DJ, a radio commentator who takes calls from people around Toronto who share their scary stories. In this episode, we have 4 short stories told about things around Toronto. First, we have JD, who talks about a cabinet that almost killed him, and I'm going to count a cabinet ghost here killed by Mari that was activated by a foci. I am assuming that this was some fragment of an elder because of the way that it acted, that there was someone trying to kill them, it smelled, there was like scratches, not that it was like a miasma, but there's not enough information about what this cabinet ghost was, but I'm just going to count the cabinet ghost killed by Mari. And then we have Lynn P telling about seeing Ashvin in the park. Ashvin was in park and she sees almost like a double exposure of Langford on him. And then two men come up to him and bother him, and then they walk away in a daze. And then later in episode 20, Siga, it is confirmed that Langford and Ashvin gave people foci and had them killed. So for me, that's enough to say that these two men were killed. And then we have Mary S. telling about almost being killed by a monster in a tunnel while she's on a run. And we can count this tunnel monster that was killed by here known as Cornelius, but eventually, and in terms of the kill count, we will know this to be Savard, the original leader of the Order. And then we have Jake S. telling about landscaping at Vanessa Bartolotti's estate, who is a famous influencer. And he witnessed something. He witnessed Giuliano and was scared by him. And then he disappears later on. And so I'm going to count Jake S. here, who died in Vanessa's Hellmouth or killed by Giuliano in his state. I'm not fully sure. I'm going to say safely he just died because of the Hellmouth. Episode 10.1, Sinapian or Possessed, Part 1. We have Evelyn doing a cursory history lesson on George Langford and learning about the Ordo Fratrum Manus Passe. I believe that's how I pronounce it. Before she gets trapped in Langford's miasma at Ashvin's store. And there are no kills here. Moving on to episode 10.2, Sinapian, Part 2. Mari learns George Langford's true name, George May, and stops his miasma. And when she encounters him, she helps Ashvin tap into his power, and we can count George May / George Langford as being killed by Ashvin. Those were his last two soul foci, and he is finally dead. Really like George Langford. I really like how, first of all, how Monty Dapple portrays George Langford, but also his story and him being an antagonist this early on really sets up how other antagonists could be in the future, and that's really cool. Later in the episode, also, Ashvin tells Mari that his parents had died, but they will be counted later, eventually. Episode 10.5, Hunger, we have the backstory of George May and his relationship with Friedrich Langford, who adopted him as a brother to hide the fact that they were lovers. It also covers his friendship with Marianne Weeks and introduces who she is more, and talking about the benefactor and how the benefactor hurt him and his friends. So no kills here either, but really good episode because it talks so much about George Langford and how he began his, it's called Hunger because he's ambitious and wants more, so that's really good. And this is also the end of Act 1. In episode 11, Nakaran, or Before, Mari tells about something that happened to her tatai, or her father, during the Marcos regime. Now, there are times where this story touches on the Marcos regime, and I'm not fully informed about the Marcos regime and things that were happening in the Philippines during that time, so I will try my best to touch on them with what the story is giving me. And if I get anything wrong, I apologize. Please let me know in the comments. I would love to know more about this. I remember watching a documentary about Imelda Marcos and liking the documentary and seeing how the Marcos regime legacy continues. That was really interesting. And also at the end of the episodes, they would have it was called The Crimes of the Marcos Regime. And Monty Dapple would share how the legacy of the Marcos regime still tarnishes Filipino politics, and there's corruption there as well. And so she's still talking about how the Marcos regime still affects the Philippines. So that's also a really great way to learn about what is happening in the Philippines if you so desire to learn more about that. Anyways, so in Nakaran, this is a story of how her father was being driven by a driver to and from the university that he worked at. And in that car, in the red Jeep, he saw an omen in the rear view mirror. And he had told his wife, Mari's mother, Nanai, about it, and she helped save him, but it turns out the omen was for the red Jeep driver, so we can count him, who was reported missing after he had dropped him off. Now, this is either a possible victim of the omen or a possible victim of the regime, especially because there was a curfew at that time, so it's unknown if the driver was killed by some supernatural force or a very evil, mundane force. But the fact that it could be either or is really terrifying and like really good mixture of history and horror. In episode 12, Pagbikti, or Hanging, we have Mari and Laura investigating the Christie Mansion hanging ghost, while Donna and Murphy investigate a murder, a possible murder. Here we have no kills here. Most of this is with Mari and Laura in the mansion encountering this terrifying ghost. Earlier in the episode, when the characters had all met together, a woman approached Laura and noticed the necklace that she wore of Marianne and asked to buy it from her because she recognized it as such. Laura didn't want it, and this woman, which we will eventually learn as CJ, speaks with a heavy French accent, finds them again in the mansion, and she banishes the ghost per Mari's wishes, but that's when Mari realizes that CJ is an elder, same as George Langford. In episode 13, Panque, or Corpse, we have Abe calling into DJ in the dark about a supposed walking corpse, which Murphy and Donner investigate, eventually with Ashvin's help. There is a brief interlude in this episode with Murphy monologuing about getting involved in the supernatural with Donner, and in that, Donner had called him and asked to bring a camera, and when he comes to a crime scene, he sees an outline of a body burned into the wall, a victim of something that Donner was investigating. And so I can count at least this body. No remnants of it, is just an outline of a burned body. It's not even like a chalk drawing, it's literally just like burn marks. Episode 13.5, Remind Me to Tell You Later, Tic Tic. Mari is telling Laura about how her cousin Nia encountered a tic-tic, similar to what she had dealt with in the clock miasma. Nia and her husband visits the Philippines briefly, and she protects her husband from getting killed by a tic-tic. We can count the tic-tic, killed by Nia. Also, I think it's implied that they ate it afterwards, that's fun. Episode 14, Danong, or Question. We have Mari, Laura, and CJ dealing with the hanging ghost, while Ashvin, Donna, and Murphy fight against the zombie clones. They follow the zombie to a shed in like a backyard, and it is a huge shed, and the zombies are duplicating, and they're fighting the zombies. We encounter the hanging ghost, finally banished by Mari. It was holding onto the foci, and they were able to remove the foci, and she was able to banish the ghost. And then we can also count 18 zombie clones killed by Ashvin. It's stated in the episode that SparkNotes version, we found a zombie, realized it was carrying a focus, following it into this weird house-sized storage shed, and now there are dozens. And then later, we're trapped in here with more than a dozen of the same man. So they use dozen and dozens at 2 different times to talk about the number of zombies. I'm just gonna go average, so that's 18 zombies that were eventually killed by Ashvin. Over the phone, Mari helps him tap into his natural power. This is when we start having Ashvin begin to learn and do magic like Mari is doing. They are both natural users, not how the elders are. The elders have gained magic through study. They just know how to do magic. Episode 14.5, The Lover. This is the backstory of Claudette Jean CJ Villeneuve and her relationship with Marianne Weeks. And here we are getting a little bit more of the start of the Ordo and learning a little bit more of William Savard as well. In this story, we're talking about how CJ has been immortal for so long, and there's very little things in her memory that have stuck with her, and these are the few things that have stuck with her. She remembers the Ordo's first kill. We can count Antoine the Vagabond that was killed by Savard. This name of Antoine was confirmed in episode 41, Danny Boy, and it is the same vagabond that they keep mentioning being the first kill person used to create a foci. Throughout the entire story, this was just a random vagabond. But it's so cool getting into episode 41 and learning that this was a person, a full name and stuff, and so makes this kill feel worse. I mean, it was still really bad, but even now we know who it is. CJ had started a relationship with Marianne, but during this time it was very difficult or even impossible to be in a relationship with someone of your same sex. And so they planned to have a lavender marriage with her, CJ, and Marianne's brother, Isaac Weeks. However, we can count Isaac Weeks, who was killed by a foci. He is named Isaac Weeks, but we get different names from him. He's either Isaac Weeks, John Robinson, John Isaac, or Jack Robin. All of those different names have appeared throughout the story, and we have all those names coalesced as John Isaac in episode 39, Tanda. And then later, along with the different names that he has, we will learn that he was killed by a foci. In this episode, CJ has an inkling what had killed Isaac Weeks. I thought that it was implying that Marianne had killed Isaac Weeks, but that didn't feel correct, but the way that it was laid out felt that way. But no, it is, he was accidentally killed by a foci. That was like the first person that the Ordo had connections to that were accidentally killed by the things that they were doing. So, after that, we can count Marianne Weeks herself, who split her soul to stop the foci. Because of what happened to Isaac Weeks, she decided to do something about it and created not as many foci as the Order had created, but a lot of foci that had parts of her soul in it. However, any of Marianne's foci are not her dying again because of some special magic that she did that they cannot understand how she did it. She is what's the term? A genius, a savant. She was so much better than any other elder there, and she killed herself to hide her secrets and to create these foci. In episode 35, Tahuan, it says,
"She took his spell and modified it, and in her experiments, she learned how to repair her friend's fatal flaw. For, according to her notes, Marianne Weeks was able to split her soul over 100 times, and yet she was able to remain herself right to the bitter end. At the same time, she knew something that no other elder seemed to know. She knew how to pass on into the next life. She knew that she knew because when one of her foci, the very first she ever made in fact, was destroyed, freeing the piece of her soul that it held within, she could feel it call to her from the other side, like the proverbial light at the end of a tunnel, like an echo of a distant church bell, she said. The call, not of the void, but of natural death, and the life beyond life that elders forfeited to cling to this one more desperately.
So she was able to do what all elders could not do and died peacefully. And her foci, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, is not her dying again, which is so cool. Love that, Marianne. After her death, CJ also remembers witnessing a coup by 3 elders. We can count George Langford and Jean-Paul Renard, who were killed by Savard in their attempt to overcome him. I had originally also listed Giovanni Grigori being killed by Savard, but he was actually killed by Giuliano Bartolotti. Confirmed in episode 16.5 Mouse, he was the first to act the day Grigori attempted to move against Savard, adept at a spill of burning blood that seared Grigori down to his boots. George Langford, Jean-Paul Renard, and Giovanni Grigori combined forces and attacked the Ordo. Savard took them down. I think it's implied the benefactor also fought them, but we only get confirmation that Savard killed Langford and Renard, and Giuliano killed Grigori. Episode 15, Saga, or Answer. We have a meeting with CJ, and they are deciding what to do next. And here we have Ashvin being invited to meet with Vanessa Bartolotti. And at the very end of this episode, Mari gets a plea from Abe in her dream. He is stuck in the Hellmouth. He had followed the corpse that he had seen before and is stuck in there and is not dead yet, but he's asking for her help. And in this episode, no one dies. Episode 16, Pasukan, or Entry. We have Laura and Murphy helping Mari infiltrate the Hellmouth and save Abe, while Ashvin and Donner parlay with Vanessa Bartolotti. Inside the Hellmouth, Mari sees trapped fear deaths, and we can count 5 people's fear deaths inside the Hellmouth that were all killed by foci. We have a man in the tunnel hit by a car, a woman drowning in a lake, a man in stark shadow being hunted down, a person tied down dying of an overdose, and a child gone exploring also hunted down. Mari also notices Alice James's fear death in here, but her death was already counted, so we don't need that anymore. Mari is able to escape the Hellmouth. Everyone is able to escape. No one dies in this episode beyond those that we witnessed. Episode 16.5, Mouse. I will say I'm spending a little bit longer on this episode because I love this episode so much. I think this is my favorite episode so far. There have been other really good episodes, but so far this has been the episode I was like locked in to this show. Finally, I was like, yes, this is what I need. This is the backstory of Nessie Smith, who was overlooked by the Ordo and other elders for her meekness and how mousy she was. One night, she witnessed Savard standing over a scale model of Toronto, and there was a portion of it burning. And he threatens her to not tell anyone. He says he would have killed her if she wasn't such a mouse. And the next day, she learns of the St. John's Ward fire. So, we get to the first mass death. I can count 200 people killed in the St. John's Ward fire. These are 200 victims, all killed by Savard. It is confirmed in episode 39 Tanda, with his great fire, he burned down the ward, the part of the city that, in Savard's view, represented everything wrong with the world. A pit of disease, both of the body and the soul. 200 dead in one night. And he used those souls to make himself powerful. But soon, news of an unexpected consequence makes Savard disappear. Sorry, I've got ahead of myself. Yeah, 200 people, mass deaths. That's a lot. I will talk about it a little later. There's going to be more. But yeah, 200 people in one fell swoop. Awesome. Anyways, sorry. The unexpected consequence. We can count William Savard Jr., Savard's son, who had died mysteriously. But we can say that he was killed by Savard, or at least died in the fire accidentally. It is confirmed in 23 Hudyat that Savard knows that his son died in a fire, and then in other episodes prior, it is further depicted how he had died in that fire. After his son died, Savard disappears, creating a power vacuum in the Ordo. And using some stolen notes from Savard, Nessie brokers a pact with Giuliano Bartolotti, becoming Vanessa Bartolotti. And she begins to curate this influencer, rich person, what's a heiress, I believe it was, as like a super famous cover for herself. We can count visitors to the Bartolotti estate killed by Giuliano Bartolotti. When many came to Giuliano Bartolotti's doorstep looking for an ally in the struggles for power Savard had left in his wake, or to challenge him for the magic and material wealth he had gathered when the Ordo fractured, Giuliano laughed, known to say, "Let me ask my wife," before shaking hands or leaving no trace but ash of their visitors on his doorstep. So, that suggests people died. I'm going to say at least one person was killed by Giuliano, visitors to the estate. I was going to count Catherine Rowland, Nessie's former mentor in the Ordo, as well. But
she did not hesitate when he made to kill their old allies, not even when Catherine Rowland invited them out to sea, thinking she could dispatch them easily for the power and secrets they possessed, only to herself be lost in the icy mist to the end of her days, which were still yet to come.
I heard that, and I was like, oh, she died. And then, which were still yet to come. So, maybe like Vanessa knows that she's still alive, or like, this is the framing of this is not Mari, maybe other Mari. We'll get to other Mari eventually. But this is a story that is sort of like an omnipotent narrator knows that Catherine Rowland is still alive in the North. So I can't count her. Also, this might be Catherine Argon. In episode 47, Pasco, part 1, the benefactor is talking to Mari and says, Catherine Argon, who tried to take a ship full of people in the Arctic before I and the Bartolottis ended her. I don't know if this is the same Catherine Rowland. I'm not fully sure about that. I'm just noting that here just in case. And then we can count 10 elders killed by the benefactor. In this power vacuum, the benefactor stepped up and looked to have an allyship with Vanessa and Giuliano Bartolotti. The first time, they refused his offer of alliance. The second time, years later, when they were 10 elders poorer and the benefactor's faction had a much larger body count than their own, they agreed. So multiple things here. I'm going to say 10 elders. That's good. This might contain some elders counted a little later, but there's no way to confirm if those people are who Vanessa is thinking about. And also it says here that the benefactor's faction had a much larger body count than their own, which means that they killed more people than Vanessa and Giuliano had. So it's suggesting that those 10 elders were killed by the benefactor by different means, maybe. I'm not fully sure. Either way, I'm going to say safely 10 kills by the benefactor. And then finally, we can count just one general body killed by the Hellmouth. Nobody could survive Vanessa Bartolotti's great machine. Those unlucky enough to wander into it would simply have to disappear. no matter her pity for their misfortune. And more than magic, money did a great job turning suspicion away from her when nobody could find bodies on her grounds. So, suggestion that similar to what happened to Jake S, people would disappear. Because of the confusion as to what happened to Jake S, I would have said that the general bodies were covered by him, but there's too much confusion about him, so I'm just going to have, just in case, another body, general body, that was killed by the Hellmouth. Great episode, loved it, love lore episodes, very Magnus Archives coded in my eyes, and I love Vanessa so much. She's such a, she's a bad person, but I love her. Anyways, episode 17, Kasunduan, or Pact. We have Donner, Ashvin, and Mari making a pact with Vanessa Bartolotti to infiltrate an elder meeting, shaking hands and being bound with her spell. Here, no one dies. Episode 18, Kate, or Slaughter. We have a DJ in the Dark episode with two stories. The first one, we have Kay talking about an ex that stalked her while on a camping trip with friends. We can count Kay's ex being killed by the, eventually we will learn to be the Wahila, a giant wolf monster, who is a woman, slay. In the next story, we have Gerard recovering at St. Michael's Hospital, who experiences something weird. There was an unnamed hospital man who was killed by Minerva the cannibal. She had picked him out and then eaten him, and then the benefactor was there too and made Gerard fall asleep and said, "You're not fresh, so I'm not going to eat you," which, terrifying to hear that. Minerva the cannibal will eventually be named in episode 40, Boulogne, so that's where she comes up. Of where I am right now, I just finished episode 59. She has not come back. I need to know more about Minerva the cannibal. Episode 19, Lamon, or Gorging. We have Abe at the hospital after recovering from the Hellmouth experience and has Mari and Laura visiting him. Mari feels the remnants of an elder passing through, and she astral projects to find this remnant. And she sees Minerva the cannibal eating this person, but is the same person that was seen in the episode prior, so I cannot count that person again. It is a past moment. However, Mari does talk about how she thinks about hospitals, and she remembers a moment in her past in the Philippines with her nanay, how she was in the hospital, and during that, a fire had broken out in a disco. And so we can count one disco fire victim who had died in that fire. And Mari and Nanai saw multiple ghosts coming through because of this fire, multiple victims, but we didn't get a definite count. And at least one ghost did come and talk to Nanai, who had distracted it and told them to that you're safe, you can go home. And as they go home, they crumble into ash, they pass away. That's at least one person that we can count. Episode 20, Siga, or Bonfire. This is a camping episode where the Wahila attacks Mari, Donner, and Ashvin because they have Vanessa's spell on them and it smells rotten. So the Wahila is trying to kill them, and the Wahila hates the elders. And no one dies in this episode. There is a mention that the Wahila killed an elder, but that kill will be counted later. It is repeated again in a later episode, and I was going to count it in that time, but it is fully described who that is in a much later episode, so I'm not counting that here. Episode 21, Manika, or Doll. Here we have Evelyn learning about the Hyde fire and finding recordings of survivor Elaine O'Donnell being interviewed by Jay the journalist. This is when we learn about a threat to the benefactor that the characters want to learn more about to see if they can use this against the benefactor, but it's all in the past anyways. In this conversation, Elaine tells Jay about her friend Lori and meeting Dr. Drosselmeyer. And in Hyde, we can count Father Mallory, who was killed by Drosselmeyer and turned into a puppet. Episode 22.1, Digmaan, or War, Part 1. We have Elaine continuing her tale to Jay, while Donner speaks with Vanessa and Lori talks with CJ, getting multiple perspectives on the puppet war between the benefactor and the Drosselmeyer, the puppet master. We can count multiple victims of Drosselmeyer and Lori. We have the gardener who was killed by Drosselmeyer. Elaine sees the gardener and sees that it is just a puppet. They are just a puppet now. Colin was a bully that was bullying Elaine, and Lori had him turned into a puppet as well, killing him. In CJ's tale to Laura, she's telling her about the conflict between elders with the benefactor, And one of these elders that was from the original Ordo, Peter Illich, was sort of left on his own devices, and he was eventually killed by Drosselmeyer. And now Puppet Peter, in Vanessa's story, goes to her estate and tries to recruit them for the war against the benefactor. And in that moment, before Peter can kill any of them two, Vanessa is able to kill him. And so this is Peter's second death as a puppet. We will eventually learn that Peter consented to all this. He was in love with Drosselmeyer, and they were in a relationship, and so that's a whole thing as well. We don't get to that in this crop of episodes, right? No, I think it's 20 something, like late 20s. Anyways, episode 22.2, Digma An, part 2. We have the puppet war story continuing. We encounter the shopkeep who was killed by Laurie. It's unknown if it was between Laurie or Drosselmeyer. However, the shopkeep didn't like Elaine and Laurie wanted to protect her, so I'm assigning his death to Laurie's. And then as Elaine keeps telling her story, she remembers a man, Jonathan, running to speak with her father about his wife, who was different. He would not go home to the thing that had his wife's face, he said. Said he dispatched it before coming to Maida. We can count Lucille, who was killed by Drosselmeyer and turned into a puppet. That was Jonathan's wife. And then when she comes to the family and says, my husband's a little crazy, but I'm taking him home, she takes him, Jonathan, to Drosselmeyer, and Drosselmeyer kills him and turns him also into a puppet. And then a little later, Elaine has to travel to Toronto for 3 days to collect her brother's things that he has sent because he is away in the war. It's 1940, so it's World War II, and he had sent things to her. However, eventually she finds out that he has died. And so we can count Elaine's brother because of how important it is to her story and what is happening in Hyde. He had died in the war. Elaine felt a lot of grief because of that, but also a lot of fear and worry of having to tell her parents that her brother had died. But it turns out, unfortunately, Elaine's parents were soon killed by Laurie within those 3 days that she was gone. Because Elaine returns back home and tells them about her brother's death, and they don't react the way that she thinks they should. And she flees from her parents, bumping into Laurie, and Laurie, her friend, takes her to Drosselmeyer's house. There she's calmed, drugged, kept a little bit complacent, and eventually finds out that she is being drugged, stops taking the food, and is able to escape and hide in the basement of Drosselmeyer before anything bad can happen. In that basement, she finds puppet remains killed by Drosselmeyer. She says, puppets, I thought at first, hanging from piano wire strings, parts strewn across tables. It was cold, so I didn't notice the smell. Not until I was close enough to touch and I felt the soft give of flesh where I thought there would be wood. This is a victim of Hyde being turned into a puppet. Elaine hides in the basement and makes sure that no one finds her there. She falls asleep, hidden in a cupboard, and she wakes when she begins to smell fire. And then she returns home and she survives the fire. This fire was set by the benefactor in an attack on the puppet master, Drosselmeyer, because this is the start of the puppet war. And it was strange because this fire should have left a lot of people killed, such as what happened in St. John's Ward. But they could not find any bodies. It is like the residents of Hyde disappeared, because I can count almost 400 residents of Hyde that were killed by Drosselmeyer and Laurie and turned into puppets, and they fled Hyde before the fire set off. Now, I'm saying 400 because of that's a lot of people killed. But also in episode 21 Manika, Evelyn had said it wasn't a huge town, but it had hundreds of people living there at its height, almost 500 at last count. In the end, there were only 50 survivors. Well, they say only because almost all of these survivors were young men who were sent to fight in the war, 100 strong, with only a small contingent returning. So it's vague about if the 100 is included in that original population of 500. Also, 100 strong, is that exactly 100, or is there plus or minus a handful of people that would still make it about 100? So in that original population of 500, it suggests that the population at the time of the puppet war was 400. 100 soldiers were in the war. If the population of Hyde at the start of the puppet war was 500, not counting the soldiers who were in the war, not part of the population count, then there were 450 people killed by Drosselmeyer and Lori. If the population of Hyde at the start of the puppet war was 400, counting part of the 500 to be the soldiers in the war, 400 to start, then that means of the 50 survivors, there was a family of 8 that were traveling, plus one night watchman who had found Elaine, so that makes 10 survivors. That means 40 soldiers had returned from the war after the fire. So by the time that the fire sets off, the technical population would be 440 because 60 people had died in the war. I'm also not counting anyone dying in the war besides Elaine's brother. And because of that, with the 50 survivors, the number killed by Drosselmeyer and Lori would be 390. That's a lot of numbers. Numbers are weird. I got confused trying to figure this out as well. But this is a mass death anyways. I'm not going to be counting it for the entirety of the kill count. And also, I've already counted some members of Hyde, people living in Hyde, being killed by Drosselmeyer or Lori. And then we will also touch on a handful of others a little bit later. So I will say there is a safe 400 people killed by Drosselmeyer and Lori. Give and take a handful, have like some space for error just in case. I think it doesn't have to be exact with this mass death, considering the prior mass death of 200 people killed by Savard. Anyways, the puppet war has started, and then we can count 2 elders who died in the war. We lost only 2 that night, and yet the next night, those 2 returned, still able to perform the spells they knew in life, still able to cast spells of fire and cutting air, no longer as easily felled as they had been. So during the war, the elders and Benefactor are fighting Drosselmeyer, Lori, and the puppets in the forest, and they're finding it difficult to take down the puppets because they are constructs, they're monsters. I'm counting them as monsters. During the war, the Benefactor had taken Vanessa into a tunnel where he discovered the Gargantua, a giant metallic machine that was left over by Savard's experimentation. In there, Vanessa says she used a vagabond that was recently killed by a foci. She tested it with a focus that had recently taken the life of a vagabond in a city alleyway, a piece I'd been keeping on hand just in case. That's a body, I can count that. In the process of the puppet war, the elders eventually learned a little bit more of how to defeat the puppets, so I can count at least 1 general puppet killed in the puppet war. Vanessa says, but I was busy chipping away at that strange machine, even as another battle raged on, turning a forest into a clearing and leaving bodies charred and melted down to wood and bone. For that was the only way we could stop the onslaught of unfeeling bodies. That suggests a handful of deaths, but there's no exact count, so I can count at least 1 puppet killed in that moment. That also suggests that they learned a little bit more of how to take down the puppets. Later, Giuliano shadow steps and kidnaps Lori, who lashes out, and in panic, he sends them to the Gargantua, where Vanessa is, and Lori is starting to take control of Vanessa, and Giuliano slits her throat, killing Lori. She's dying and she's gurgling from the blood, and her fear death begins to power the Gargantua. And the Benefactor sees this, and he reacts, and he now adds 100 puppets killed by the Benefactor.
And in a desperate moment, the Benefactor plunged his hand into the tear and cast a spell I could not hear for the roaring in my ears. I watched the portal bigger than any one elder could ever conjure up open right then and there, and watched as hundreds of vessels of wood and meat fell as the magic was drained out of them. Life forces that powered them all siphoned through, rushing toward the tear where the Benefactor intercepted them. Hundreds of lives, his to claim, just as Savard had done, setting his great fire so many years ago, mere nights before he disappeared.
Now, hundreds is too vague. It's unknown how many puppets they had dealt with already by this time, so hundreds, that's a safe 100 puppets that the Benefactor had killed to power himself. Great. That is, by my count, the 3rd mass death that happened in the first 22 episodes. 23. Actually, this would be because of the addendums. The 29th episode? Yeah, the 29th episode. 3 mass deaths. Awesome. So after this, Drosselmeyer is defeated. Drosselmeyer faces off against the Benefactor, and the Benefactor wants to work with Drosselmeyer, and they decide to destroy their own brain. So we can count the Drosselmeyer now as being killed, because now that Lori is dead, there's nothing else for the puppet master to do. So they kill themselves. A little later, at the end of the episode, there is a last story of Lori telling about her fantasy tale. And here it's heavily suggested that Lori's parents were killed by Drosselmeyer and turned into puppets. Again, this is 2 members of Hyde that would count into that population. And also, Lori was part of that population of Hyde. So, 3 other people on top of the, I think I counted 9 other members of Hyde before the mass death I counted. So, yeah, mass deaths. Really fun. It's really fun to do this. And finally, episode 23, Hudyat, or Signal. There are fire alarms going off throughout the city, and Mari meets with Cornelius and realizes that he's an elder. This is where Cornelius says that his son died in the fire. His son was William Savard Jr., who we have already counted, so that's past now. In this episode, it's not said that Cornelius is Savard and so that his son is William. It's just, connecting the dots. He's talking about his son. This is where he says that he knows that his son died from a fire, so that clears up the death early in the season. Later in the episode, Donner also interviews a survivor of a fire, one of these fires because of the fire alarms. And we can count 4 bent and folded figures that were attacking her in some sort of miasma that were all killed by Mari. Mari and Cornelius / Savard had found her and saved her, and Mari was the one, they had bodies around her. And they're monsters. I'm not fully sure what these were. I don't know if it was a miasma because of the focus or some sort of folklore monster. So if you know, please let me know. And yeah, that is all the deaths so far in Hainai. Now on to the statistics. As I've done before, inspired by Dead Meat Channel, I have the Best Bookmark Award for my favorite kill, which I will be giving to George Langford's final death by the hands of Ashfin. Like I said, I really like him as a first antagonist, Act 1 antagonist, and that sets up the Ordo, the Elders, and everything like that for the future. So I really like that. Also, Ashfin was able to tap into his power and to be able to kill such a powerful ghost like Langford, because Mari had issues to deal with Langford as well. That Ashfin was able to do that shows how much power he has as well. So that also sets up him being a natural user to hurt the Elders as well. So that's really good. I really like how this changes Ashfin's character. He was also hurt by Langford, so it's sort of like revenge in a way. Yeah. And I also have the Skipped Scene Award for least favorite kill, which I will be giving to the burned body that Murphy had seen that Donner was investigating. There's no information about that. It's just a burned body. There's no evidence. There's no closure for me as to why this happened either. This is the most boring kill I unfortunately had to count. So, not counting mass deaths, there is a total of 90 people / monsters killed in the first 30 episodes of Hainai. 90 people over 30 episodes means there are 3 kills per episode, pretty clean. Now counting mass deaths, we have a total of 790 people / monsters killed. 790 people killed over 30 episodes means we have an average of 26.33 repeated kills per episode. I will not be including the mass death kills further in the kill count because now it gets a little convoluted with how much kills there are. But I just wanted to do this to show how crazy it was counting this. I was also trying to make sure that I got all the mass deaths in one kill count edition, so I didn't have to deal with them later. This is a gender distribution of the kills, not counting mass deaths. We have 9 women, 48 men, 10 monsters, and 23 of a neutral gender. And of mass deaths, we have 100 monsters. Those are the puppets that the benefactor has killed. And then 600 of a neutral gender that is split between victims of the St. John's Wort fire and victims of Hyde. I didn't want to include those mass deaths into the gender distribution because that would make monsters and neuter gender huge on a pie chart and you can barely see the men and women. So I didn't want to do that. That's not as fun. I'm also keeping track of individual body counts because of how many good characters there are. And so not counting mass deaths, we have at the lower end George Langford with 2 confirmed kills. Donner has 3 confirmed kills. Vanessa and Juliana Bartoli have a combination of 5 confirmed kills. Savard has 6 confirmed kills. There are 8 confirmed kills by Foci. The Benefactor killed 10 elders, so that's 10 confirmed kills here. The Benefactor isn't as active in this section as he is in later sections. Mari ties with the Benefactor with 10 confirmed kills, and all those kills are different types of people, so she beats the Benefactor in terms of diversity, I guess. Drosselmeyer and Lori have a combination of 12 confirmed kills, and Ashvin has 19 confirmed kills. That is 1 George Langford and 18 zombies. Now, counting mass deaths, I wanted to show the absurdity of it. At the lower end of the board, we have 19 confirmed kills from Ashvin. For the Benefactor, we have 110. Savard has 206, and Drosselmeyer and Lori have 412. So you can see the differences of amounts. I'm not going to be including the mass deaths for running totals and stuff like that for the next few rounds of kill counts that I'm going to be doing. So just know that the Benefactor, Savard, and Drosselmeyer and Lori have killed a lot of people. But yeah, anyways, that is the kill counts for episodes 1 through 23. That is 30 episodes exactly of Hainai. Really fun. I love the addendum episodes sometimes I don't. But most of the time, they're really good. Like The Lover, 14.5, pretty good. Hunger, pretty good. Mouse, amazing. Love that. I love split episodes as well, like Digmaan, the War episode. Loved both of those episodes. So good. And I really love all the characters as well. And I really, like I said, I really need Laura to be here more with an axe to kill more people with. Please? Please? Anyways, thank you so much. If you've gone this far, have you seen Hainai? If you have, please let me know. I'd love to talk to people about Hainai. I love this show so much. Keep a lookout for the next edition of the Hainai Kill Count. I don't know when that's coming up. I have a handful of other projects that I'm working on, but soon, hope to be soon. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.